So there's a certain amount of battle and there's a certain amount of heart that you naturally have ingrained in you. I think as men to fight, there's fight or flight, right? And some guys just have fight in them, but it's not that that's a bad thing. It's just when it's out of control that leads to a problem. But fight in somebody is a good thing.
That was Dean McAmmond, owner of 996 NHL regular season games and an 18-year pro career. And you are listening to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolin. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello there, and welcome back, or welcome to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolin. I am here for episode number 106. No, 107. 107 is what you're going to hear. We have Dean McAmmond on the program today. Dino just lives down the way from me. He is one of the players that decided to retire in the beautiful Okanagan Valley here. Not unlike many others like Wade Redden and Jerome McGinley and Carey Price and Shea Weber and Jordan Tutu. And anyways, the list goes on and on for the guys here in the area that have decided to call home after their careers. And Dean has been, I would call him a friend. I think he would call me a friend too. We go for the odd lunch together, and Dean's just a great guy all around. Like, he's one of those guys that has a certain energy about him when you're around him that's welcoming and comforting and easy, I guess. I don't know. I describe people by energy sometimes. Like, there's just people that are easy to be around, that you enjoy being in their presence, and some it's kind of an indifference, and there's some where you feel an energy that you just don't really want to be there. But Dave is one of those guys that I find has an energy that, Dean is a guy that has one of those energies that you want to be around. And it's been a long time coming to get him on the podcast. I've been joking with him about it for a couple of years now. And today was the day where it finally happened. And for those of you who don't know Dean, if you're not a hockey fan from through the 2000s or the 90s, you might not know him. And if you're not from the local area, maybe you don't know him. But he was a 22nd overall pick to the Chicago Blackhawks out of the Western League. He played for Prince Albert. Had a 18-year career, 996 NHL games. We talk about that milestone at the very end of our discussion there, towards the end of the second hour, if you're sticking around that long, about the significance of that 1,000 games and what an elite club that is, and how he fell 4 games short. And there is a story around that. But I mean, over the course of his career, Edmonton Oilers, Chicago Blackhawks, Philadelphia Flyers, Calgary Flames, Avalanche, back to the Flames, to the Blues, to the Senators, played with the Islanders and also with the Devils, was all over the place, traded 5 or 6 times. We get into that, what type of consequences that had on his family, and just on his own, personal well-being, and the nature of the game when it comes into that context. And seen it all, done a lot, been to 3 Stanley Cup Finals, one with the Blackhawks, another one with the Senators, and another one with the Flames. Unfortunately, came up short in all 3. We talk about that. We talk about competitive spirit in the game and what that means to players. We spent quite a bit of time talking about smaller players and some of the advice that we could give to them coming along, and what that means to be a smaller player, how you can still capitalize on that and make it to be one of your advantages. What else do we cover? We spend quite a bit of time on spirituality, and maybe more spirituality than religion. Dean is religious. We talk about that and what type of role that played for him, not only along his journey and through junior, but also through the NHL and his relationship with that, and how he had to navigate that, in the team environment, how it benefited him in areas where he felt that his spirituality and his religion was definitely a guiding force for him and a compass that helped him stay true to his goals. And I talk about that in the sense of it being a performance tool. And I know people don't get involved in religion to be a better hockey player, but a lot of the tenets there, we have a discussion about that, like tenets of religion, when we talk about doubt, for instance, at a point in this conversation, and the way Catholicism or Christianity deals with doubt, gives you tools to move forward. There's an underlying foundation and principle around there to help you with doubt. It's the same thing that I help players with, dealing with doubt, but there's just not a religious context to it. So I find that a lot of the teachings of the Bible or different spiritualities, different denominations, have connections to being a better athlete, being a better player, being a higher performer, being a more well-adjusted person. And that I'm all about that. I'm all about building the holistic idea of the athlete. And so we have a really good discussion about that. Spirituality and what role it's meant for Dean in his life. And it's not something that we've really touched on this program before. And I think, why not? I know it's a hockey program, but we are talking with a hockey player and talking about how it affected him. And I don't really, it's not necessarily preachy about that you're supposed to, but I do find, for me, there was a big curiosity about religion on an individual level. And after we stopped the podcast, Dean and I talked for a little bit just kind of about that, like the nature of curiosity, I think is a good one to have. For me, I legitimately researched almost every major religion throughout my 20s, was trying to find where I fit with it and with spirituality and what it meant to me. And I think it's an amazing resource for people, like for Dean, who has founded and like a guy like Jerome McGinley, and there's many NHLers. I talked about Brad Larson on the podcast that use that have religion as being a basis, a foundation of everything else that they're doing, and it gives them a sense of peace and a sense of belief and trust that things are being taken care of. And I'm all for that. Like, I'm just all for people finding what makes them tick. When I'm working with my athletes, I talk about it being your own personal operating manual, and to use a religious term, like to be your own personal Bible. Like, what makes you you, and how do you function, not only on the ice best, but how do you function off the ice best? How do you function in a locker room best? How do you function at school best with your family and your relationships? Everyone's different, and everyone's going to have something that resonates with them. And if you're someone out there that has doubt or has insecurity or has some issues with how things are going, maybe you're not operating. I feel like you're operating on all eight cylinders. Then explore what's out there. Like, there is high performance mindset training. There is religious aspects. There is different religions. There's different avenues for you to get into to find out what works for you. I'm totally about progress. I think that's why we're here. If anyone has ever read my philosophy on my website, I think we're here to evolve. I think we're here to grow on an individual level and as a human species community. And I think if we're not doing that, if you're not actively engaged in doing that, I think we're missing out. So if you are in a space of, neutrality, like maybe things aren't moving for you, maybe things aren't going the direction you want them to go, maybe you don't see much progress in your life, then like explore, go look, go be curious, find something that might work for you. And maybe religion is something that if you don't have that in your life, maybe that's something that's going to really work for you. And that was just a big point of our conversation today, which I'm glad I allowed Dean to have that space to talk about it, because I think in a lot of contexts, it's just not something that does get talked about, yet it is a really foundational piece of a lot of people in their day-to-day lives, and also how they manage some of the anxieties and demands of a high performance sport like professional hockey. So awesome we were able to talk about that. I hope you enjoy that portion of it. We even get into a little bit of like societal, like our idea of like where physicality should be involved, or how it should be involved in society, or maybe school, and talking about kind of this fighter spirit that is in some of the men and young boys around, and obviously in the women too. Dino was talking about it more in in the male heart, in the male spirit, and we have a little interesting conversation about that. I think you'll find that quite interesting, and yeah, I mean, this is really good. It was a kind of a deep conversation here. Less about hockey, less about hockey stories. This one, less about his favorite goal and who the hardest goalie to score against was, or best teammate, and any of that. It was more just a kind of a personal, in-depth, philosophical discussion in a lot of sense. So maybe a little bit off of where the program usually goes. I know for me, and if anyone who knows me on a personal level, like, I love these types of discussions. Like, I totally love them. I love getting into what people believe and why they believe it, and what makes them tick, and I love it. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. So I really appreciate Dino being willing to have the conversation with me, and I hope it's one that you enjoy. So without further ado, I bring you a NHL veteran of 996 games and plenty of playoff games and some AHL games mixed in there, and a great human being in his own right, Mr. Dean McAmmond. Mr. Dean McAmmond.
Hey, how you doing, Patsy? Good to see
Now
you.
you're supposed to say yes, thanks. Nice for being here.
Oh, okay. Is that I'm so grateful that you have me on your podcast. I've been waiting to get on this. I've been like up here every morning waiting for the call. Just I wonder if he's going to have me on today. So it's a great day. Friday, closing out the work week. I'm stoked.
There you go. I love it. I love the enthusiasm, whether it was faked or not. We'll just go with it.
Fake it till you make it.
I do appreciate you being on, though. It's been, Dean, for anyone listening, is someone local here to the area. So we actually kind of have properties a little bit down the way from each other, and see each other from time to time. And Dean's been amazing enough to come out and help out even with some of my development stuff for my kids. But just it's never worked out that either asked or hasn't been available or just whatever. So we've been kicking the can down the road, and now here we are 3 years in, and finally coming on as a formal Up My Hockey guest. So it's awesome that it's happening, because I know there's a ton of stuff we can talk about in the 996 games and the lead up to those games and everything else that happened in your career. So again, appreciate you taking the time. I know you got a doc to build, so we'll dive right in.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's get to it. Yeah, take your time. The doc, and it's not going anywhere.
Beauty. The first thing that sticks out is, and I know we've talked a little bit about this offline before, but the hockey, like just starting. I mean, my listenership, I think, is young families, hockey players like you were and I was back 13, 14 years old, that are, thinking that they want to play the game, maybe in some capacity, and the parents are trying to figure it out, and kind of the whole idea behind here is, hey, let's talk about some of the stories and let's share some of the lessons that have come up along the way. You said it says year you were born in Grande Cache, Alberta. Is that where you grew up playing your minor hockey?
Yeah, up until I was 13. Yeah, I played minor hockey there. Yeah.
Was it serious to you up till then? At that point,
it was serious when I got on the ice and I was playing the games. Right, practice wasn't super serious. The intensity level. I mean, I played Pee Wee. I think the highest level I played was, we had a traveling team where they put together our house league teams, right, and made a kind of like a traveling team that we would play, and we would play Pee Wee A at best. So yeah, up until I was 13, I played that. At 14, then I left and I played in the neighboring town in Hinton, and that was only Banamay. So still, I mean, I competed hard and played hard, but the pressure at a young age was not there. Basically, it was just playing hockey and having fun, pretty much.
Gotcha. So at what point did the WHL come on your radar? Did you get listed young? Did you know about maybe scouts watching you or any of that stuff?
I did, but I did get listed young. I didn't think of scouts watching me any time before I got listed. Actually, my older brother also played junior hockey. He tried to turn pro, but just kind of never. He got hurt in the whole scenario there. But he was a good player, so he got scouted out of St. Albert when he played midget there, and went on to play in Prince Albert. So me being 4.5 years younger, I was kind of the younger brother that was coming along. So I was kind of already on the Raiders, radar, and Medicine Hat Tigers as well. So I went to both of their camps early on. I went to Medicine Hats first, and they invited me back to another one. And when I went to Prince Albert, they had a kind of like a spring camp off site, so it was in Shore Park. And when I went in there, my brother was kind of like, just go and play and have fun. I was like, sure, why not? Well, what else am I going to do? So being Pee Wee A at most, right? I go in there, and now I'm in the city in Edmonton, and it's like these guys. I'm looking at their jackets, and they got Pee Wee AAA, this, and the CAC Canadians, and they're all these big clubs. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm in over my head. And so I didn't know no scout has ever talked to me. I'm just going to try out at the camp that my brother's on this team, and at the end of the camp, it was interesting because there was this one kid that kind of caught me off guard and really rocked me, and I was like, this is not good. Like playing house league and Pee Wee A in Grand Cache was like, well, I'm the guy, right? Like I seriously had two moms as coaches in our because nobody was coaching, so we had two moms, and then our traveling team had I don't know who. So it was just like there was really nobody at the time that I would really have to compete with. So I get to this this spring camp for the Raiders, and this kid's trying to crush me, and it really ticked me off. So this whole time in this little camp, he and I are going at it. Like we're 13 years old, and it was like it was just we weren't thinking anything other than I'm going to get him the next shift out. And so at the end of the camp, I remember the coach for the Raiders was Rick Wilson, and he there was a scout that came and said, "Oh, Coach Rick wants to see you." And I was like, "Oh my goodness! Like the coach of the Raiders wants to see me? Like, okay, what did I do?" So I get marched down. I remember marched in the stands down towards Rick, and here's this other kid standing beside him, and I'm like, "Oh no, we're in trouble. We're in trouble for competing and trying to kill each other." And so he said that he sat us both down. He said, "Well, hey guys, I think you guys did pretty good, and I just want to let you know that we listed both you guys today." And so we were like, I was like 13 years old. I was like, "What? You listed me? What are you talking about? What does that mean?" So so it was 13, and I was like, yeah, that was kind of the start. So I kind of knew where I was going to end up if I could make the jump at 16.
What a wild story. And just because it's like reflective, and I know it was from a different time and a different era. I mean, that would have probably looks like you would have been late 80s when that would have happened. But like, I love talking to kids now about the competitive nature of like the business and the competitive aspect of like what your personality can do for you if you want to display that on the ice, right? If you can like bottle that. And so there's a firsthand example of you just being you, really, right? Being competitive and getting pissed off and, wanting to battle. And who does the coach bring in? The two most competitive guys probably on the ice at that point, right? That everyone was noticing that these guys are battling and they're going to war at each other.
Yeah. And, I think those are some of the things that can, do set players apart. You see kind of the deeper level than just being able to execute a pass or knowing where to be or understanding, they can teach you the game. They can tell you where to be and help you along the way. But man, some guys have grit, some guys have skill, some guys have toughness. And if they don't see that, like that character, they might overlook you in some areas. And I think, on the topic of these kids now, I think they're, a lot more skilled. There's a lot more development going on than what we had, for sure. 100%. I think it was year 8 in the NHL when I finally went back to Chicago. We had Alpo Sohonen, who was a coach in Toronto, assistant coach in Toronto. He got hired for the Blackhawks, and he was a Finn from Finland, of course. And I remember him saying, like, "Okay, but guys, I'm in the room." Alex Zaminoff, Tony Monti, I think Dougie Gilmore is still there. We got some really high-end NHL players, and myself, Steve Sullivan, Sully, right? So then Michael Nylander. I remember him saying, for the first 20 minutes, we're going to work on skills. And that's the first time I heard that in 8 years of playing pro. We're just going to work on skills. I remember sitting there thinking, what's this guy talking about, work on skills? We're already in the show, right? So, so I can see now the kids, they're definitely, on that pace where they're working on their skills, right? But Oh man, that's a side story. I'm down. Might need to bring me back. I'm kind of down to an old trail here. So, um,
No, but I mean, I love that. I mean, because that was, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I don't remember. I don't remember working on like I remember working hard, like and working out hard. Like you mean like that was sort of like our era was when the whole physical aspect of like the summer and the off season came in, right? Like
yeah,
where
and
yeah,
because
go ahead.
you're from like 4 or 5 years behind me.
Yeah,
What
I'm a 76. So I'm like,
yes,
yeah.
yeah. So like when I was coming, I mean, I never got a workout program from anybody until I think until the Hawks or even the Flyers after that. Like again, 8 years later, it was not. You kind of had to figure it out for yourself.
All right. Yeah, but so like that was the era where that was. I mean, the fitness testing started to happen, right? And there was like awards at camp, and they were taking all the VO2 more serious, and like so I grew up during that era, but there was no like going home and working on your hands or you know what I mean, like off season skill stuff, even on season skill stuff. Like there was none of that, right? And then to your point, it's like, well, I'm in the show, right? Or like
Yeah.
whatever. Like you know, it was sort of like a bit of a fixed mindset about that whole aspect, and I love that story because I can imagine all you guys looking at each other like skills. Like we're the best in the world. What are you talking about? What are we
Yeah.
supposed to be
It was
doing here?
funny because I don't know why I'm working on skills because when I was in Edmonton, they tried to coach the skill right out of you. So I don't know what I need skill for. Like it's just like don't handle the puck, just dump it, chase it, bang somebody, and try and get it back. So yeah, it was a totally different game back then.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, and these kids, to your point, I mean, back to where that started from, like legitimately, like the stuff that I'm doing now, I never did ever, right? Like with 9, 10, 11 year olds. You know what I mean? And they're doing that the entire time. We're working on D skills and forward skills and edges and hands and you know, and the way even like the practice are designed and developed, it's like, I mean, they're definitely farther, they have much greater advantage of being a higher skill. And you can see that, right? You can definitely see that. But I'm wondering if that is where like if that because of that in some aspect is some of this competitive nature like now out, you
Uh,
know, like do you
I
think?
think it is actually. Oddly enough, I was just watching. I was in Prince Albert. Went up there for just a visit to visit my old billets, and I was in Swift Current for another. 30 years ago, we had the anniversary team where we had the anniversary team. Yeah, from the Broncos where we won the Western League. But so I was back in Swift Current and then in Prince Albert. But when I was up early looking on, turned the TV on, and there was a hockey game being played, and I actually I was searching to find out it was Team Canada against the U.S. But I got it halfway through and I didn't know who it was, but I was like, oh, this looks like either a world championship or maybe even an Olympic game. But it was from 2012, so it's kind of really because the guys were competing and it was a lot more physical. There was more hits. There was more. It was more engaging, more battles, and I was like kind of puzzled when this era was and what level it was, and it was actually World Juniors. And I thought right away, like there's a different dimension happening in that old game in 2012. That's only, going on whatever, 11 years ago, just over 10, 11 years ago. And I was like, I didn't see that in this past World Juniors. I saw really good skating but the hits and the actual physical contact was not what it was. And definitely, of course, when we broke in, not even close, right? You still had, tough guys and still lots of your power forwards weren't necessarily super skilled. They were more bang and crash and just have a physical presence. And yeah, that's starting to kind of not disappear but slowly fade to the background.
Right. But then to my point where I'm like, oh, I get so jazzed up when I see somebody. Like I was just watching U18 AAA at the CSSHL playoffs, and there was this one kid on the ice that to me just stood out like a sore thumb because he was big and he could skate and he had he had skill, but he loved to bang, right? And it was so obvious. Like it stood out so much, like his competitive nature. And these guys are unicorns now, right? Like I just think that, there's still enough of us. And I'm sure like when you were coaching there, like if you saw somebody that had a little bit of that old cut from the cloth of, 10 years or yesteryear ago, right? Like you still need those guys in your team. You win with those guys. They probably supply way more intimidation now than they ever did back in the day, right? Because nobody's doing it. So and I just try and get the kids like to just like squeeze out every ounce of competitiveness you have. I mean, as far as your nature is concerned, and get gritty and add that sandpaper to your game, because it's such a competitive advantage in this day and age to try and ascend the ladder, you know?
Right. I mean, yeah, old school, get in, bang the D man, make him cough up the puck. I think part of it too is the difference of the game now is the puck is always moving. It's always moving. I watched the game, well, one of the, a Western League game where it was like a tennis match. It was like fire the puck out, tip it in the other zone. The D-man would go back, fire it out, tip it in the zone. It was back and forth. There wasn't a lot of time when you could, line up a D-man and,
Right.
make them pay for trying to handle the puck. It seems to be, it's just, they get rid of it. A lot of time spent chasing and just, getting it out of your zone, getting into the other zone. Of course, that's elimination of the red line. That's kind of, developed that kind of system of play. But again, it's not like you don't have the puck long enough to start laying guys out. So I wonder if it's guys kind of like, well, the big hits aren't there anymore because you're too late getting there. The puck's already gone.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there is, well, and the defensemen are so much faster now. I mean, as getting back on the retrievals and everything else. So there is a few elements to it. Not to mention the fact that the way that they ref the game now, like it takes away some of the incentive of the big hit. Like anytime there's a big hit, it's a contact to the head or it's a charge or it's something. I mean, it's like you can't hit somebody too hard anymore because there's some type of penalty associated with it. So I think, there's not much reward for the player to actually go in and line somebody up.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. Yeah.
That well, I mean, geez, I mean, maybe that is a good segue. Like, how are you with that? I mean, a lot of people who know you and your career, like that hit by Downey and wherever that was. I think he was with Ottawa. I'm not sure who you were with. Like, that's one of the, you know, you can 10 worst hits of all time, probably top 5 worst hits of all time. Late hit, like now he'd be gone probably forever. Like, do you think like where the league's gone with the protecting the players is in a sweet spot right now? Is that where it should be in your opinion, or has it gone too far? Or like how do you feel as somebody that's gone through it yourself of with the injuries that are involved in some of these high hits?
Well, I think the high hit, it needs to be eliminated. I think there's some where, the game is so fast, and when they slow it down with video, they can catch some maybe slight adjustment that the player made to hit the guy in a compromised position. But sometimes you go in even when you try and protect yourself and you bump somebody, you got your hands out. Well, it looks like you're cross-checking the guy. So, there's situations where that physical contact could be interpreted like you're trying to be intentful, but really a lot of times there's times where it's like, you're not really cognitively trying to do that. Now, so I think guys are a lot more cautious because of the hits that the suspensions that they've levied. So yeah, I think it's made the guys a little bit more sensitive to not having that happen because, like, I mean, let's face it, you get suspended, you don't get paid either, and at the big level, that's a lot of money left on the table if they take a suspension. Not to mention, the situation to put their team in. But I mean, going back to my hit that I received from Downey when I was in Ottawa, he was in Philly.
Right.
Yeah, he definitely was flagrant. Definitely was late. Yeah, and I think it was the proper action they took. But I mean, I mean, it's my claim to fame now. I mean, I played 996, but I did a chapel in West Kelowna years back, and the other guy that was helping out, he was like, "Oh, this is Dean McAmmond, played with this team." No response. "Oh, I played for that team." No response. Kids didn't have a clue who I was. And then they say, "Oh, and in 2008, received a big hit from Steve Downey." I was like, "Oh, we know who you are now." So, anyway, that's a fun story attached to that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, infamy, I guess, right? In a few ways. I mean, for the League One, I mean, Downey too. I mean, that kind of made him famous. Although that wasn't the only time that he kind of had hits like that. He was one of those guys that was known for doing that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, knowing you, I don't care who you are. Like, that's a tough hit to watch. And imagine being you or being your mom or your dad or your wife at the time or anyone. Like that. that was tough to watch.
Yeah, it wasn't even a hockey play. I mean, I was targeted. I didn't even have the puck. I had passed the puck like 1,000, 2,000 before that. He wasn't even paying attention to that. So I mean, I think the league made the right choice. And it's not hard to levy fines for those guys. It's the ones where, again, like we're saying, where it's very kind of incidental that you get a head contact, and you get a few of those, and then you get labeled, and it's a slippery slope.
I agree, and I don't like when I really don't like the fact that they when they do announce whatever it is, whether it was a bad hit or a good hit, is like to your point, this frame by frame, you break down a thing that happens in like a quarter of a second over 30 seconds. The game's not like that, and I don't know. It's just it's really easy to nitpick. I mean, I think we're getting away from the idea that this is a physical game, and there's very few Steve Downings, I think, personally, the guys that are actually trying to hit somebody with intent to hurt. I think the vast majority of the time, it's just a guy trying to make a play,
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the tough guys are basically eliminated. There are tough guys, but their role of the tough guy is gone. It's long gone. Yeah, but I agree with you as far as breaking it down. So it makes me think of a goal that was in the Cup maybe 2 years ago when Calgary was on. It was a goal where they said that he kicked it in the net, but I mean, he was crashing. This player was crashing the net, and he got cross-checked from behind, and he basically was falling towards the post, and it was like chaos. But it was in the milliseconds of breaking it down in video, it looks like he was on actually 1 foot, and it looks like on that 1 foot, it looks like he turns his foot to kick it in the net. I'm like, man, he's dealing with a guy on his back, a net. He's getting driven into the post, but it looks like he turns. I'm like, come on, it was.
That was Calgary, I think. That was Calgary.
It was Calgary. I don't remember the player, but I was just like, man, it is heavily scrutinized. But I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't complain. Actually, I will complain, because in 2004, when I was with Calgary and we made that Cup run, unbelievable magic moment. We would actually be Stanley Cup champs if they had that scrutiny again, because that was the one where a goal where in 2004 Marty Jalna scored against Tampa in Game 6 Stanley Cup Finals, and you can see I've got a picture of the puck hovering over the goal line, and Habibulin's pad is behind the goal line, and the puck is just in air suspended, and it's either on its way in to hit his pad and cross the line, or on its way out after already crossing the line. But the technology they had back then couldn't determine, because it was a center ice shot, couldn't determine where the puck is. So they're like, we can't tell you if it was in or not, when everybody else is like, well, it's got to be in. Right. Physics actually confirmed that it's in. It's just the camera couldn't. So anyway, it sounds like I might be bitter, and I think I am.
Well, you should be. No, for real, because that's so crazy. Even that, right? People remember the real fans remember who Tampa played, but for the most part, you remember who won the Cup that year. You kind of forget about the teams that were in the final, and you were like that, like you say, it was technically a technological disadvantage away from being a Stanley Cup champion, right?
Yeah.
And you technically got it done. I love that's so bonkers too, right? To get there and to actually do it, but then not to have it and have it taken away from you. Man, that's super tough for sure.
Well, let's go move on to something else so I don't tank here.
So I don't tank. Just want to take a short break from the podcast to give a shout out to some of the new reviews that have come in over the past couple weeks, which I will read now. Always love getting the new reviews, as I've said here many times, for this podcast to grow and for Up My Hockey to grow, and to get the idea of holistic development, meaning the mindset development of hockey players out there to the world. Small gestures like a review from you who are listening makes a big difference in the algorithms and getting it placed in front of more people. So thank you to Hockey Mom, who gives 5 stars. Wealth of information from a single mom of 4 boys who play hockey. That's from Edgy88 via Apple Podcasts in the United States. Thank you so much to Edgy88. Hockey mom of 4. My goodness. we're hockey parents of 3, and it is bonkers here with 3 playing. Adding a 4th one to the mix, I can't imagine how you can do it. So glad that the My Hockey podcast is helping. Another review, inspirational hockey podcast, 5 stars. This one is from Great Britain, coming from CD53 from Great Britain. I love that this podcast is getting out there. More fans in the United States all the time, also from overseas, Great Britain, France, Switzerland, Germany. It's fantastic. And so CD53 says, fantastic podcast for anyone looking to get better at hockey. Truly inspiring. Thank you, Jason. Well, thank you, CD53 from Great Britain, for writing those, and I'm happy to share them here. So if you are somebody that's out there who hasn't written a review yet, who hasn't taken the the minute maybe it would take to write that, get out there and do it. Here's my challenge to you: get out there and do it. Let's get these podcast reviews over 100. We're still under 100, I think, in the 70 or 75 range now. And I think it's like a 4.8 or 4.9. Some goofball early on, like I don't even know who, wrote like 1 star and kind of had no comment. So that brought it down for everyone else. But since then, it's been pretty much all 5 stars and the odd 4-star here and there. So I'm super appreciative of all that. Let's get it up over 100. Challenge is out. Thanks so much. Now let's get back to the interview with Dean McAmmond. Well, where can we go? I'm remembering your story about being 13, and I'll just share a quick story because I got listed at 13 too. I was right before my year of the WHL draft. There was 3 of us that had been listed at 13 years old. So like I was the last opportunity where there were people not available for the draft, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So like the next year, everybody was available. There was no 13-year-olds anymore. So the year after my draft year was the first real robust draft. And so I was able to go to the Spokane Chiefs like main camp at 13. You know, when you're 13, there's not many kids that are listed at 13, and so you're sort of a prize prospect. And I was able to go out there with the big boys, right? So I'm 13, and I'm out there with like Whitney and Toporowski and like all these guys. And I remember my first face-off, I played center then. They had me at center, and I was facing off against Whitney, and Whitney legitimately won the draw so hard he went like past his D-men, right, like into his own zone, and I'm like chasing the puck down, no clue what I'm doing. It was Kerry Toporowski was the guy going back for it, and anyways, like, I don't remember much of like that whole era, but I do remember like how like holy smokes, like this is the big league. These guys are good, and I'm little, and
there's a drastic difference between us at 13 and an 18, 19-year-old that's actually conditioned themselves and heading to a NHL camp, that in the fall, or has just come back from an NHL camp. Like as a 16-year-old, actually, when I was in NPA, we had Reed Simpson come back from the Flyers. He was up for quite a while, and Simmer was a tough guy, but he comes back, he scores 3 goals his first game back, and I'm like, what? This is a tough guy? And I mean, he did slow down later, but coming back from that level, it's like there's a long jump from 13 to 16, and then 16 to like these 20-year-olds. Man, they're men, and you're just a kid playing against these guys.
You're listed here at 5'11". Is that how tall you are?
Not anymore. I'm probably 5'10" now. I was 5'11" and 3/4, just trying to scrape 6 feet.
Is that where you topped out?
Gotcha. I'm now maybe just trying to scrape 5'11".
So I'm asking only because like at 13, were you an early mature when it came to your height and stuff, or were you a smaller kid?
I don't think I was very big, like stature wise, but like I was always fairly stocky. And just my natural build, kind of naturally bigger legs, bigger glutes. So I kind of had the built-in power plant, and then, some, a fairly decent build for, frame for that size. So yeah, I was physically able to compete, in a physical dimension at 13, like I said, and a few screws loose too. So that was helpful.
Well, it's just such an interesting era because like and it's come up a lot in my Facebook group for those listening. If you want to get in, the parent group called Up My Hockey, and we've got about 2,000 people in there now. But there's some discussions about size and how size, even in kind of in today's game where it's not necessarily as physical, but at this Bantam level, right, where it's kind of the big first transition now. I would say it's either the biggest or the second biggest transition because those kids are going from cross ice to full ice with real refs and offsides and ice scenes. And like that whole transition from novice to Atom is pretty big. But now they're knowing the game, and now you're introducing contact from zero contact in the minor hockey system to like full-fledged contact. It's quite a transition for some of these guys. And, one example is even on our U15 team this year, like the smallest kid on the team was about 80 pounds and the biggest kid was like 195 pounds. Like there's a big spread at that age, right? Depending on when you grow or how you grow. And so there's talk about, well, how do you compete? Or what do you do? Do you, from your experience, or even like if you were to have a message to some of these kids who are late maturers, like what is there a message or a lesson out there to get them through this point?
Well, I think it's a little bit of a tough single answer. I think it comes to the individual kid. One, if you're small, you got to play really heads up. You can't avoid, you can't avoid the physical contact, but you can learn to be aware of your surroundings and have your head up. And I think that's one. So that comes down to individual, and of course being helped or coached by a good coach at that level to help kids understand, where they might get hit. There's situational awareness of like what's surrounding them. So I think one, heads up, number one, it's huge. And I think kids are, definitely more skillful, but I don't know if we teach them situational awareness as much. And so that physical part would definitely come into play with that, being able to recognize when you're compromising yourself. Even how to take a hit now. I do think they do. I know that I believe you've done some of those programs or teaching it's skill to actually receive and give hits. How you take it. Like lots of kids may not know even how to do that. So, and then if they've implemented the head contact, so for some of those bigger guys, it makes it difficult even for them to finish the check on some of those smaller, shorter guys. So. There's a few dynamics at play, but again, I guess the situational awareness and just the skill of being heads up when you're playing is definitely helpful.
Yeah, I agree with you. I in some aspects, and that's where I try and get these kids to when I'm talking with them, and if they are a smaller player and kind of feeling they got the short end of the stick, or it's harder for me, right? It's like I try to get to them to think of it as almost an advantage at this point because they're not going to be little forever, right? Like at some point you're going to grow, and that because you have to play the game with a higher level of awareness and with a higher level of hockey IQ, like you actually have an advantage over that big guy because he doesn't have to play the game the way you do. And I guess to your point, we talked about a little bit before, is like a perfect example is Eric Lindros, in my opinion. One of the biggest, strongest, fastest, most skilled players to ever grace our game. But he never had to play. Like, it wasn't like he was a dumb hockey player. Everybody stretch the imagination, right? But he understood the game, but he got away with stuff being as big as he was that he was able to look down at the puck more because guys would just bounce off him.
Yeah.
Right. And then at the highest level, obviously you're going to run into guys who are big and strong. And I think that at the end of the day, ended up being what hurt his career, right? Like that
I would agree. Yeah. He was a man through junior. He was like a man amongst boys. So we didn't have to deal with Scott Stevens. Right. Yeah. And that's maybe a harsh way to, just sum it up, but it is true. You spend your time looking down at the puck or not having that threat, like a small guy, exactly what you're saying. I can see how that would be maybe a bit of a handcuff or a hang up down the road when you do turn pro. So
my oldest isn't the biggest kid right now. He's not like super small, but like he was, I think, the second lightest guy in the team. And that's what I talked to him about. He's hard to hit. He's good in his edges. And there's some skill things too that I think these younger guys or smaller players need to like understand that they got to develop, right? if you are smaller, lighter, not quite as physically gifted at a younger age, then your edges should be a little bit better. Like you should be working on some evasiveness and some misdirection, and the fact that you have to actually have your head up and to be able to use the people around you, I think makes you a better, more aware hockey player. Yeah, I mean, if they can just channel that, that's sort of my message all the time is like, well, what, I mean, everyone has their thing, right? Like some players can't shoot as well, or some players don't have as good as hands. Like everyone has something that they need to overcome. And if size is the thing for you, just up the competitive nature and
Yeah,
up those things around that are going to actually make you valuable, because there's a lot. I mean, the other thing is too, like, I think for the first time in a long time, like how many smaller players, like the league's getting smaller. The NHL's getting smaller by the minute,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, I mean, there's more opportunities for small guys. You just got to be able to play. So
yeah.
I think if they can overcome that U15 kind of scenario and just kind of push through and keep playing, there's the world's your oyster, I think, really.
I think so too. And like foot speed, learning how to get in and out of trouble. Like I look at when I was coaching my son coming through minor hockey, when we turned Bantam, physical contact and whatnot. Well, Stankoven played for Kamloops, and we all know Stankoven. And he was not a big player. He was not, but nobody could really touch him because he was fleet of foot. He was always in motion, always had his head up. So he's always playing the game like because he's been a small guy his whole
Yeah.
career, and I mean he's doing pretty good right now if you ask me.
And talk about an engine and competitive, right? Him.
100%. He was, yeah. I always say like if it wasn't for him, we might have had a chance to win the league that year. But yeah, he'd turn it up. I mean, just a
Yeah.
good player.
No, I love that. I mean, I think he's a great example. And actually, I used him. I'm glad you bring him up because he is not tall, right? He's strong. Like he's done a lot of things to be strong, but it's his engine and his competitive spirit, I think, that stands out every single time he's on the ice.
Yeah,
He doesn't play timid. He doesn't play small. He plays big with a huge heart. And there's a lot of examples out there. And that's, I guess, my message is to younger guys too. Like there's so many examples in the NHL or in junior right now that you can watch and fall in love with the player that is a little bit smaller that emulates exactly how to get it done at that
yeah,
level,
yeah, for sure.
and copy him, right? I mean, that's one of the greatest things is to watch the game not from a fan perspective,
Yeah,
watch it from a learning knowledge perspective, and you can pick up a lot of things from those guys because they're not there by accident most of
no,
the time.
no, yeah, for sure. Yeah, size is not limiting like it used to be, but still, again, yeah, have to be smart, have to be so aware, so heads
You
up.
watch
I
the
mean,
Oilers still?
no, look at Gretzky way back in the day, how they were saying, oh, he's untouchable. Nobody's supposed to allowed to hit him. I mean, they're partly true, right? They had Semenko to protect him, but
Yeah.
really, I mean, Gretzky was an amazing, cognitively smart guy. He never put himself in those situations. Always was aware of where guys were, and so you couldn't really, unless they just kind of took a blindside run at him.
Yeah.
It was hard to hit him way back.
Yeah, well, I agree. I agree. That was probably his greatest gift. I was just going to say, if you've watched the Oilers, like one guy that I bring up sometimes is ex-Spokane Chief Yamamoto, and some people like him, some people, whatever you think about him personally, it's tough to argue his competitiveness, right? And his engine, and he's not big. And he
No,
doesn't intimidate because he's going to run you over. And little guys don't have to do that. But the thing is like, are you hard on sticks and are you hard on pucks? And where's your second and third level effort? And like for him, like that's just something that I think he brings every night. And it stands out to me, even going back to you telling your story about a 13-year-old, you couldn't have been one of the bigger guys on the ice there during that camp. But, like that second, third level effort and being hard on pucks and not quitting, the determination, like that stands out so much.
yeah, and it doesn't limit you as far as being like I would imagine Yamamoto like knows he's not big, so what's he going to do? He's going to be pound for pound as strong as he can be, right? I know there's a number of guys, I can think of multiple guys that I played with or against, like a 100 guys come to name, but like a Dally Drake I played in St. Louis, play the body like crazy and not a super big guy, right? Like a Scott Nickel in Calgary, not a big guy, but like pound for pound, he would go head to head with Iggy in the physical like training aspect, like as far as the top flame back then. As far as your physical, you're talking about you have your fitness tests and whatnot and their contests. He was always right up there with Iggy, who was again a specimen. But yeah, those guys were super powerful for their size, and yeah, lots of guys in the league back then. You weren't big, but you had to make sure you're jacked and ready to be able to engage that physical part.
Yeah. Martin St. Louis is another one that comes to mind. I mean, he was, how big
Absolutely.
was he below the belt line, right? I don't mean his
Exactly.
stature.
Even though he's super skilled, like
Yeah.
he could take a hit and be physical in the corners.
Yeah. Did I meant to ask you, so we were talking about Downey there. I don't want to bring that back only in the sense of was there ever a conversation between you and him? Like, did he ever call or say sorry or any of that?
Yeah, he did. He did call me up. I think it was the next day or a day later. Yeah, 2 days. I'm not sure, but he did call me up. Yeah, he did call me up. He said sorry, apologize, bad hit. Hope you're okay. And I was okay. I didn't have really any. I don't think I have any lasting effects. But you ask my wife, she says, "Oh yeah, that day changed you for good." But
Were you ready
yeah,
to
I
hear
so
it?
did. But it was probably, and he was probably told that you should maybe call McAmmond and maybe see if you can lessen your sentence.
Right.
Yeah.
So were you in a spot where you could hear that at that point?
What do you mean?
Well, I just mean like were you ready to hear an
See,
apology? Were you ready to like forgive him if that was even something you could do or have done?
yeah, yeah, I did. I mean, I just took it at face value, even though he's probably trying to call to lessen his sentence. I thought, well, you know, he's taken the step, so it gives me the opportunity to just release it and not have to worry too much. I mean, if I was in a different situation, not that I'm some sort of superhuman to be able to just shake it off and be like, yeah, no problem. But if I would have had like a broken neck and I had paralysis or, some sort of bigger issue, I mean, I was out, for those who maybe haven't seen the video, I was out cold. And I actually there was guys stepping on me while I'm like out cold face first on the ice. Like it was a pretty sketchy situation actually. So because I didn't come out of it with any kind of physical ailment other than concussion symptoms and maybe long term like slowness out of it, like I could still count. So I'm not doing too bad. But if it was anything worse, then I might
Right.
have had a harder time. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I know. I totally get it. Um, Going back to PA, we kind of got off the rails a little bit there as we tend to do, but you played at 16, I think, right? Like that was
Yeah.
you. Yeah, you played at 16.
Yeah.
What was that? Do you have any memories of your first year? Like, I mean, for me, that was kind of one of my big years of getting into the WHL, and you're playing against these guys that are 20, some 21, and obviously from the maturity standpoint, even the behavior standpoint, what they're into, not even outside of hockey, it's a pretty pivotal, big transition. Do you have any memories from your 16-year-old year there that stand out?
I do. Yeah. Um, I remember. I mean, I was pretty sheltered growing up. Not really aware of any social, not stigma, but social standards. I remember going to over this one place that some of the guys are going to this place, and yeah, come on over. And so I go, and it's a house party, and I was 16 on the Raiders, and this this girl comes up whose house it was, and I was like overwhelmed. She's like, can I get you something to drink? And I was like, I'll have a glass of milk. I would do that. Like totally unaware, like what's going on. Way over my head. I was just like, I'm just a small town kid. Yeah. So I do remember that as far as the social part. On the on ice stuff, just little things where I was just raw. I was just a raw player. I had what I had, but I didn't have much coaching. Didn't know how to play systems. Nothing.
Right.
But I remember one of the first exhibition games I had two. Kevin Riel was with Medicine Hat. He was one of their older players.
Yeah.
And in the exhibition game, he had two. And I remember I had two, and I was 16 years old. And I look back and I was like, that's what they saw, right? They didn't see a perfect player. They saw lots of flaws, but they saw something they could work with at the time. So
Right.
that's some
Yeah.
few memories. And of course, remember my first couple scraps as a 16-year-old playing in the Western League. So yeah, those are memories that I'll hold on to.
Well, you probably found your way naturally into those too, like with you're probably buzzing around there, and you're naive. I can never say that word, but being a little naive, right?
Yeah.
Like about whatever. You probably bumped a few of the wrong guys and made a name for yourself.
Yeah.
Early.
Luckily, I didn't bump. Yeah. Yeah. Too many big guys. I stay away from them, but I ended up in later on in the junior, like next year too, I ended up playing with a guy named David Nielsen was my left winger, and he was our resident tough guy actually.
Yeah.
After Reed went on to play in the minors, so yeah, so David and I are like thick as thieves, and man, I got in so many like line brawls and scraps, and Turner Stevenson.
Yeah.
Yeah, Turner, big guy, knuckle chucker, big. He comes after me in a game where it's like, I'm not even the tough guy, and yet we start getting at it in the corner because he's just starting something because he wants to change the pace of it, and I'm like, well, I gotta go. There's no choice. You're into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely different than it is now.
Back to the milk stories. So that's funny. I mean, and I'm drawing a connection because my last guest is a guy by the name of Brady Leavold. Have you ever heard his story?
No, I haven't.
Holy smokes. So like Rocky to your foundation kind of stuff. Like he was a Western leaguer, played with Jamie Benn with the Rockets. He got signed by Tampa, and he ended up getting hurt himself. He Percocets for painkiller, and like really crazy story. Like ended up being homeless on the streets of Hastings. Like ended up in jail for 3 years. Hard drugs, like the whole 9 yards. Anyways, his message now is amazing. He's been clean for 3 years. He's telling his story. He's anyways, it's quite a powerful story to hear. But he talks about his time in junior hockey, and definitely there was a drinking culture when I was there. You talked about, the house party that you went to, and alcohol was sort of part of the system. Did you did you, I don't know what you want to share or not share, but like, did that ever become part of it for you? Like, was the beer, or were you able to stick to the kind of the hometown roots and stay away from that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah, I didn't. I mean, I would still go out to some of the house parties and be with the guys, but I never remember it being anything where it was out of control for me. Maybe a beer here or there. I don't remember. Yeah, again, that I didn't have any issue with it. I just kind of was like, I brought up to stay clear of it. So I did for the most part, but I would still go out to the parties and hang out. It just didn't become anything that was dominant at all. And then I was actually surprised because we were in the playoffs and we ended up losing to Saskatoon, and we actually had 6 guys in the All-Star game that year. So we had a really strong team in PA that year, and we should have went further. And one thing that just really stands out was right at the end of the game when we lost game 4, or our 4th loss to Saskatoon, the guys most of them were not even concerned that we lost. They were just concerned, like, where are we going tonight? And that's a true story. I was just like, I was shocked because, I was like, well, I'm thinking we can go and win the league and maybe go to the Memorial Cup. We got a great team. And these guys were like, after we were done, they were focused on, I'll just go and party somewhere. And I went home. And the next day I ended up going up to Chicago and playing in the Stanley Cup run there, which was great. And I was really shocked at how their focus was more on antics. And you know what, to be honest, one of those guys had a little bit of a career, which was Darren Van Imp, and Imper he's a pretty good guy. I don't know how much he had for, distraction as far as that crew, but anyway, point being is that I was surprised at the distraction it was for a lot of players, and I'm just glad that I wasn't involved too much with that because it kept me focused on what I was there for, and that was to play hockey.
Yeah, no, great point. And that was, some of those things got brought up in the conversation with Brady too, just like as far as, lessons or advice. And one of the things he spoke about was like the desire to fit in, especially as a younger guy, and to appease. And, there's going to be guys, I would assume, I don't know, I haven't been around a locker room like I did at a pro level in a long time. And, I'm working with the junior A team, but I'm not into like what their social life looks like or whatever. But there's generally, there's a crew that are probably out doing that, and how do you keep did you ever feel any of that pressure, I guess, is maybe going back to you? Like, it sounds like you were left alone to be able to do your thing. Like, were you, I don't know, what was the social dynamic of that? You being true to your goals and what you wanted to do, and some of these other guys are maybe running around not quite as focused.
Yeah, at junior it wasn't an issue. I think because there was a a skill I was listed young. I was touted to go in the draft, so I was kind of the one that was leading the charge and not really involved in the after hours
Yeah.
curriculum. But so I didn't feel like there was much of a pressure there. But once I turned pro, and I was in the minors and up in Edmonton and whatnot, then it was different because the guys would go out, and then it was all of a sudden where we weren't. I wasn't spending as much time with them, and you kind of feel like you're a bit on the outside of what's going on socially with the guys, and so then do you feel like you're not being judgmental, but you're kind of now distancing, and so it kind of does end up in a place where we're a team. How are we going to gel as a team when we're not really we're on the ice, but we're not spending as much time off the ice together? And there's a lot of like guys. Some guys are lots of guys were married, got kids, and so there's a separator there where some of the guys that are single and whatnot. Well, we're going out. Well, I'm not. I'm just gonna whatever. So I did get drawn more into that center just to be part of the group and part of the team. So yeah, it's a tougher it's a tougher line to be, a hard line in that situation for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of the guys having the beers. I mean, to be perfectly honest, like I would be out, like I enjoyed the time with the guys. Not that I was like, judging anybody that wouldn't, but that for me was really part of the fun of the game. You know what I mean? And going out and doing what you were saying. And I always had respect for the guys that would still come out and not have some beers, like, which was great. I mean, for me, there was nothing wrong with that. So I just think like sometimes people, seem to be a little bit shy, or like what people are going to think. Like, gosh, like the one thing I just try and talk when I'm talking with my players is like, be you, right? Like be comfortable being you. And that's respected, like, I don't know. Like it's just there's enough. I think there's enough good people in a locker room that they want that. And I think that team aspect of whatever that thing is, whether there's beers involved or not, right? It's just the fact of being together, So
Yeah.
I don't know. I do think it's tough when the guy that doesn't want to have a beer, doesn't want to do what's happening, and just like stays home and you never see them, because they're not part of it, right?
No, it's hard to build a relationship with that guy in that way because you do need that off ice bonding. It's just back then it was most of it was done that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would be a separator for guys that were a little bit more shy, a little bit more socially just kind of quiet and just refrained and not so a little more introverted.
Right. You mentioned about your foundation kind of, or your like the way you were raised. Like, can you speak to that a little bit? Like just knowing, like, so when you entered into that ecosystem and that environment, that you had this foundation that you sort of knew what you wanted, you knew what you were about, and that temptation or whatever word you might want to use just wasn't there.
Yeah. I was raised in a Christian home, so we went to church. So I had a lot of ideals, or not rules, but a way I was brought up. So I wasn't brought up with alcohol. I wasn't brought up with drinking, about going out and partying and whatnot. My parents were church going people, and home mostly every night. My dad worked hard, so I didn't see that growing up. And so when I was kind of submerged in that kind of a world, like junior wasn't a real huge deal. I was still pretty solid with my upbringing, like what we were talking about. But as I got older and more around it a little bit more, I found it easier and easier to just understand and be involved, but not totally judgmental. And I think when I was in Edmonton, what was hard was that at the time I was so cautious about not making mistakes or this or that, and then I would be in the dressing room and I would be stressed out. I'd be worried about my game. I'd be worried that I'm not really on the in crowd, and I was really maybe a little bit more introverted from that group. And so I found I was isolating myself, and I didn't really have to isolate. I could be more inclusive. And exactly to your point, I could still be me in those situations and be who I am, but rubbing shoulders and still being friends with these guys rather than isolating myself and making it a little bit more uncomfortable where they're guessing where I'm at, and I'm not totally feeling on top of the room camaraderie as well. So it was really a dynamic where it kept me from maybe being a lot more easygoing and enjoyable in the room, and so it was that's a convoluted way to say that it was a little bit more I wouldn't say tension, but a little bit more questioning, where's this guy at?
Yeah. Well, you're finding your way, right? I mean, you're finding your way, and then anytime you throw another layer on that finding your way aspect, you're trying to be an NHLer. You want to have friends. You want to be true to who you are and what you're about. You want to be true to your upbringing and the standards your parents have for yourself and the standards you have, and like there's a lot going on in those things right there, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard. I mean, it's hard for anyone to figure out. And do you feel that you're like the spiritual side of you, and whether that's whether it's a connection to the rules of the book that you follow, or just that connection to that unknown, was that a really guiding principle for you along hockey and as long as you chasing that NHL dream and that career?
Yes, it was the separating point, or the hard thing to separate was, as a player and as a person, you basically in your own life, you seem to not be able to separate the player and the person. So it's like, if I feel like I'm doing good, well, then I should do good on the ice. I feel like if I'm, performing off the ice, or I'm keeping my nose clean, then I should have results on the ice. And it's really not correlated to that at all. I mean, it's not. And I used to think, because I believe in God and I have a faith that, I should be the best player on the ice, right? And so it is not like that whatsoever, right? I am who I am, and I believe what I believe as a person, period. And whatever I have for faith and whatnot helps me in my personal life, right? And then I'm a hockey player, and I take that person and put it in a jersey or put it in that situation. It's not one where I have an extra, fan, or I have some extra go juice in my back pocket to get me better results. It's not like that at all. So it was really hard to figure that out, where you'd look at some guys that maybe not have the same principles, that are scoring goals left and right and having the success, and you're like, how does this work? But so it can be really hard to separate that from a faith and a performance orientated type of,
Right.
not crutch, but what I think.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying. Yeah.
Did it because I've heard people speak about their religion or their spirituality, and I'm going to combine that now with like depression or dealing with mistakes or anxiety or these things, right? Like I think it sounds like people who are connected to their faith, like there is almost like a calmness or a little bit more of a reassurance that maybe a bit more resiliency when it comes to the player now, that things are going to either get better, or that I'm going to be able to persevere through this, or whatever like that message is. Do you think that helped, like the personal foundation helped you deal with some of the anxieties and pressures as a player?
Yes, it did. Like I was saying before, how it led me to questions as why I wasn't having more success, and why I wasn't better than I was, or why this player is having this done. And that was a misconception about, God is not a genie in my bottle that I rub to get my success. It's not that at all. But an applied faith where, when things aren't going good, like one story would be when I had my Achilles tendon severed in Edmonton, right? I had it fixed and repaired. And then, so it would have been year 3 of my pro career. I got sent to the minors. And I didn't feel like I should have got sent to the minors, and I was miserable down there. And I realized when I was down there, there's a lot of good hockey players in the minors trying to come up and turn an NHL pro. And at that point, I was like, I need to change my attitude. Like I'm not on this fast track just because I have this faith that I believe. It's separated. So the story comes to me when I got back in Edmonton. I was playing well. I was playing on the fourth line with Todd Marchand and Mike Greer, who's now both of those guys are in LA, California. One's in player development and one's a GM. So Rosie, we called him. Rosie and Toddy and I are on the fourth line, and we're actually playing good. I mean, you look at those two players. We're the young, in Edmonton, we were just all young. So we, those guys had good careers. But at the time, we were playing fourth line minutes. I was playing left wing with Toddy and Rosie. And I was asked by one of our ticket guys that I was friends with. He was run the front office. He was, how are you doing? And I was like, I'm good. I'm playing well. And at that time, I had to apply where my faith and my performance and myself as a player across was. I couldn't change anything. All I could do was my best. But what I did was I prayed before I got on any ice. I just got, before I step out on this ice, I'm just going to invite you to come and help me to be the best I can be. And I want you to come and be on the ice with me. And as soon as I step on this ice, I'm not going to worry about anything. I'm going to trust you that you got everything in control. And when I step on this ice, I'm just going to be a hockey player. And it was that applied faith that helped me just go and play hockey and not worry about the results, not worry about things. And interestingly enough, that year, Ryan Smith, who was our everybody knows Ryan, right? Yeah. He was playing with Dougie Waite and Billy Guerin. And Ryan goes down with an ankle injury. And they moved me from the fourth line to the first line. And I played with Billy Waite and Dougie Guerin. And I finished second in scoring that year.
That's crazy.
So, that's a pretty cool story in my history.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. The applied faith, I like how you use that, and interesting, like that. I can connect like the high performance aspect of what that was happening in your head too, right? Being able to clear the mechanism almost, right, and just being able to go out there and play. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I'm not. It's kind of weird because like when you talk about that, like I'm not taking away from your faith, but it is like that's where you got that from, and that ability to do that was because of your belief system. And then there's people who are agnostic or atheists, but that can still try and cultivate that same scenario, right? Like, and wherever they get that from, but that is really what we're trying to accomplish, is going out there and playing.
Yes, right? The tool is 100% applicable. Depending, it doesn't matter, what your foundation is. So I agree with you. It's just, bigger picture.
How do you get to it? How do you get to it? Right? How do you get to that spot? And me and Brad Larson, there's actually Brad doesn't talk about it too much, I don't think, publicly, because I guess he doesn't really have to. Like, it comes up if he wants to, but he's I think the right term would be like a born again Christian, and head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. And when I was talking with him offline, actually, after he got the job, it was just interesting to hear him because he was in the interview process, and everything was happening, and there was just a very awesome energy, a very low vibe energy, in what could have been in all accounts a very high energy, high stress kind of time. And he attributed it to his faith, just saying, like, I know that I'm doing what I need to do to have this happen, right? Like I'm all in, right? And I've been all in for 8 years. Yeah. If I don't get the job, though, I'm comfortable with that, because it's just not, it's whatever. I mean, he would use the term God, like, God, I mean, it's not ready. He's not ready for me to have that. And so him having that faith allowed the anxiety of a situation just to essentially be gone. And he was just able to show up and do his best. So, like, again, me not coming, like, I was born Catholic. I'm not a practicing Catholic, and it's not a part of my my daily routine, but I totally understand, like, I can see the principle and how that works and how that's effective and how it's like, makes him a better human, and all these things, right? That can stem from that. And I applaud that regardless of where it comes from, because really at the end of the day, what you want to do is to be an active, engaged community member that's not high anxiety, that's, giving good energy out to those around you. And wherever that comes from, I'm no one to say if it's right or wrong, but I could feel it, right? So there's something there. When you talk about it too, there's something there. So I think it's fantastic, when guys are able to use it and channel it and have success from it, right? Personal success and game success. I think they're both important, obviously, especially to hockey players who want to be playing for a while, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe since we're on that, like, I know you are involved with the Vernon Vipers here locally. Like, you talked about Chapel, a story that you did there. Maybe just give you the floor. Like, how do you get involved with that, and why is it important to you to do that, and what does the Chapel look like with Dean McAmmond?
Well, the chapel is run by David Hockley, who he's the pastor of the Coldstream Church. So he kind of heads it up. He invited me to help him out, participate, be involved about 5 years ago now. So he kind of comes up with the format, what we're going to do. Once in a while, he'll take a holiday or have a leave where he can't be there, and I'll take over and kind of come up with my own, either stick with our kind of scheduled program, what we got, or share a little bit from my life with the guys, talk a little bit my hockey experiences and whatnot. And so for the most part, he leads it, and I just kind of like he does the play-by-play, and I just kind of fill in a little bit of the color. And I think with the fact that, in my history of my life, I've had that God intersect my life in my career a few times where it's where there's no question that he was involved in the early stages and the middle stages and the final stages, not just in hockey, but in my life. There's enough times when, I reached out and he had an answer for me in some situations. Example, when we were one of my last years in Ottawa, when I was playing in Ottawa, I signed there as a free agent. I had a 1-year deal, and my oldest daughter was going into grade 10. So she had been in school in I think she had 1 or 2 years in the same school in a row. That's it, since her whole inception of school. So we're in Ottawa. She's at a different school almost every year of her elementary. Now she's going in grade 10. And I remember taking this crated glass top that was crated with nails and 2x4s. And I got 4 kids and dogs. I can't leave this thing in pieces in the garage. I need to get rid of it, but I only have a 1-year deal. I might need to crate up everything else in the house and put this thing in. And so I took it out to the end of the curb and end of the driveway and put it on the curb. And I remember specifically just putting it down. And I looked up and I said, I need 2 more years. And I turned around, I walked back into the house, and that was in Ottawa, my first year. Well, we go to the Stanley Cup Finals. In game 3, I ended up banking one in off the pronger, and it ended up being the game-winning goal. I played fourth line minutes, but I had a really strong year. I had a really strong playoff push. We went on. We ended up losing in the Stanley Cup Finals to Anaheim. So fast forward a few days, a week later, I'm packing up my stuff. I'm in the office getting some stuff done in the Sens office. And on my way out, I passed by John Muckler, who was at that time the GM of our team. I passed by his office, and he just says my name. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, hey, come on in. So I walk in, and he's like, hey, Dean, how you doing? I'm good. Yeah, tough break. How you feeling? Because I got hurt by Pronger. How you feeling? I said, I'm feeling good. He says, you had a pretty good year. And I was like, oh, thanks. He says, I was thinking, do you want to stay here? And I was like, yeah, I do. And he says, how about 2 more years? And I said, that would be really good. And the next day, he got fired. So John Mucker got fired the next day. So what happened was the assistant GM to John knew that we had a verbal agreement, a handshake deal. And so when Brian Murray took over, Brian Murray honored that deal, and I got 2 more years at Ottawa. So that's where, God has stepped into my life, and not just for me as a player, but I mean, that's bigger, right? That involves my wife, and which is another story of how we met, my kids. It's more encompassing than just scoring goals, because if it was just related to that, I got another story about when a man that was running chapel programs for the NHL through Hockey Ministries. We were with myself, David Booth, Mike Fisher, and Noah Welch. We were all in Florida just hanging out. Booth was with Florida, the Panthers. Fish and I were in Ottawa. This guy, at the end of it, like hanging out with Fish and I, he's like, let me pray for you guys, for tomorrow's game. So he's, yeah, sure. Fish goes out. Fish has 2 goals. I get benched. So it doesn't have any implications on performance. It's just random. So, yeah, figure that one out. You just got to take the good with the bad and trust that it's all going to work out. So,
what are some of the topics? So, I mean, I find it super interesting. Like I do team building stuff, again, not from a religious standpoint, but I truly, truly believe that like the holistic person, right? You mentioned the player and the athlete. Like I think like the development of both allows you to be a better player on the ice, the better person you are off the ice. Like you can plug in the word character into there or whatever you want, but that development of the human being allows you to be a better hockey player. And I think when you structure the conversation around that, especially to young kids, sometimes like there's a little too much intangible involved in like what does it mean to have good character or why is it even important to them, right? But when you can put at the end of the day that, like this is going to make you a better teammate, this is going to make you more valuable in the locker room, this is going to give you more chances because people are going to like you. I mean, there's going to be more resiliency involved. You're going to be able to stand up from overcome mistakes easier, like all that kind of stuff. Now, when you can frame it that way and you're going to make your goals and dreams come true or have a better chance of making them come true, now they start to listen, right? So like, right. I like having that audience and having those topics, but what in a chapel do you guys would you talk about on that aspect of growing the person? What would be some of the things you'd hit on?
Well, like we were in chapel yesterday. Our topic was doubt. Where does doubt come in? How, what are things that you doubt? Where's the foundation of why we doubt? And so that was just an example of what we're going to focus on. And then what do we do to combat that doubt? What do we hear? What do we think about? And that's exactly to your point. Like, where's our mind in this situation? And like as a player, that doubt, whatever it is that you've heard from a coach, a parent, a girlfriend, a brother, sister, it doesn't matter. Some of those things that if you're stuck thinking about and you identify with some of the negative things that they've said, whether, I'm not good enough, or you're not going to make it, or whatever. Like, sometimes we tie those thoughts to our performance and it sewers us, right? Rather than having what is success? Define success. Is it just scoring goals, right? Like to really kind of broaden our scope and then think about, what good do I have to offer? Where am I good? Where am I good enough? And then build and focus on those things instead of always comparing. Like if you compare yourself to Connor McDavid right now, right? That's a bad comparison. And you focused on, I'm not him, so I'm not good. Right. That's a real bad mindset. That'll lead to doubts for sure. I mean, that's just one example. Yeah. And it could be, smaller, comparisons like than that. But, I don't drive that guy's car, or whatever it might be. Right. Or, I didn't get drafted. So what? Or I didn't go high enough in draft. Right. Or Bantam draft or NHL draft, whatever it is. Like I'll trade my draft position with Daniel Alfredsson today. Because the year that I got drafted, Daniel Alfredsson went like 165th overall. You know what? I'll trade my career and paychecks for Daniel's, and he can have my 22nd pick. No problem. Done deal. Yeah. Because it's, so if he's stuck on that, it's really, a lot of that could lead to those. Anyway, so that's kind of, we'll pick on something like that. And I'll share a story, of a coach that said after year 8 of my career, I'm working on my sticks, and he looks at me, and he was a phenomenally skilled player. He looks at me and says, you're not skilled enough to worry about your sticks. Like if I let those things land as a player and I put too much in, that can lead to a lot of discouragement, a lot of doubting myself. And so again, you're 100% right in what we let in and what we don't let in. So those principles, for me, the faith part is, and in the chapel program is, what's backing those principles, right? What's behind those things? Like, yes, power, positive thinking, 100%. But why are we taking those? What's backing the principles that we're using? Love your neighbor, those type of things,
Right.
love your wife. What's backing those principles? Is there a movement, not a movement, but is there something behind that is kind of got your back in those situations?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that's where, like the story about in Ottawa, when I put the crate out on the end of that, and I was like, I got 1 year. I'm going to do my best, but I could use some help. And that's where those intersections where that stepped in, I feel like God stepped in and helped me in that situation. And it was more than just being a hockey player. It's my family situation.
No, for sure. No, what a great topic, doubt. I mean, and I love that you bring that up, because it's totally something that I work with players, and then trying to give them tools and strategies, like you say, to maybe overcome that, to try and build the personal resolve to understand why, like why it's important. Like, and for me, it's like interesting, because like the dots that get connected aren't the same dots for every player, right? Like for when it's going to work or why it's going to work, but there is inherently, usually there's some type of perspective shift that is involved, right? Like whatever you gave importance to before, you now see in a different way that it's not as important as you originally thought, right?
Yeah.
Or you can connect importance to something else. And again, to your point, now when you're talking about something as big as God, that is maybe the foundational resolve and purpose behind it all, that's an even bigger perspective. And for those that get that shift, like there's a massive transformation with why it's all happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, I think it's beautiful. I think it's all beautiful, right? Like if this is what works, and if this supplies, the meaning for how to go out and operate and not let doubt affect you, like it can, like, fantastic. I mean, I think that's amazing. And is that how you, like, in the chapel then, is there, obviously it's chapel, so is there the connection to the spiritual? Is it connected back to that somehow all the time?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we pull out, or Dave pulls out different verses in the Bible that talk about doubt, and it says, do not. Well, I can't quote it exactly because I don't have it in front of me, but it says, "Let your mind rest on things that are, honoring, that are thoughtful, that are pure, that are genuine." Like it talks about, transforming your mind so you're not focused on that, but it talks about Spirit of God is love, joy, patience, kindness, gentleness, right? If you think about those things, then it's only going to help you.
Yeah.
And it's just a tool, a principle that you use, but it's, right from like verses out of the Bible. And
Right.
those are the kind of things that we use, to kind of just anchor the message of what we're bringing.
Yeah, it's so wild because I see so many crossovers, just because I'm so immersed in personal development, and whether it be Tony Robbins or Brendan Bouchard or like whatever, there's a ton of gurus out there, but the principles of like what they talk about is so like connected to biblical verses as well. Like Tony Robbins is famous for saying, "Where your focus goes, your energy flows." Like that's a really basic tenet that you could find, like, pieces of the Bible that are saying the exact same thing, right? Like just in a different way, and maybe for a different reason, right? Like, and I think that's sort of like what you're talking about, obviously, with the connection to the spirituality of where you're at there. Like the message is from the Almighty, and like it's not just a human figure that's saying it, but again, the principle matters, right? And however you connect the dots, like I'm so open to that. And I think it's amazing. And the power is in the words and how you are able to, act on that. Right. And that's sort of like, for me, and I'm sure that's what you want to do, is like to get these players to be able to act, like to give them a new way to operate. And when you operate in a new way, you have the potential to get different results, and results that maybe you haven't had before.
Right.
So anyways, lots of stuff. Thanks for sharing there. I do think it's a topic and an area that I've always been fascinated by spirituality and even like the different religions. And it's something that I've personally researched all through my 20s, kind of all the corners of what people believe. And I find it quite fascinating. And I know a lot of people that it's a major piece of their lives. And and generally speaking, they're mostly always really good people too. So maybe there's a connection there.
Yeah, they might. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe what's back. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a bit of a poke here, because you're supposed to be kind and gentle. Yet in year 91, 92 with the Raiders, you had 189 PIMs there. What brought you to the?
I wasn't good at turning the other cheek.
Everyone has their deficits, right?
Yeah, but you know what? In the same breath, like I read a book, not Erwin McManus. It's called Wild at Heart. I forget the author, but I remember actually talking with Joe Sakic, read the same book. And there's something in us as men that is ingrained in us, and it's our heart. It's called Wild at Heart. And it's interesting. There was one subject that I remember Joe and I were talking, and he said what his favorite part of that book was. The author was talking about his kids, right? You got multiple boys. He had multiple boys, and one time his boy came home from school, and he was dejected, and he was down, and he was kind of glum, and he was not typically that way. So the author said, "Well, what's wrong?" And he said, "Well, I got pushed down today in the playground, right?" And when he got up, it was like his feelings were hurt and whatnot, but he wasn't supposed to interact, right? Like it was like where we tell him to, turn the other cheek and whatnot. But there's a certain part of your heart that gets squelched when you are being told to not fight back, because there's some part of our nature as men that it's ingrained in us to battle. It really is. It's different, I think, than women. And I don't want to get into men, women, but the author said that he took his son, who's young, and he kind of looked at him and he said, "The next time that happens, son, take and drive that kid right in the chest." And he said the life came back in his son, like, yeah, yeah, that makes sense to me, right? So there's a certain amount of battle, and there's a certain amount of heart that you naturally have ingrained in you, I think, as men, to fight. There's fight or flight, right? And some guys just have fight in them, but it's not that that's a bad thing. It's just when it's out of control that leads to a problem. But fighting somebody is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's a principle that I agree with, and now I'm started thinking like societal and stuff, and like the playground and schools, and it's because it's being removed, like it's being extracted, man, like everywhere. And again, like I'm not like, hey, let's everyone go meet at the bike racks and see who's the toughest kid at school, but like it is the worst thing if there's a fight. It's like you couldn't imagine, like any type of physical altercation right now in an elementary school or in a high school is deemed to be like, awful.
Yeah.
And I'm not the one running around like saying, yeah, everyone should be doing it, but like I don't think it is awful. Like I think that there's actually a time and a place, and it's needed. I think it's necessary at times.
Absolutely. There's a certain amount of that where you need to be able to test yourself, because guys, they compete. There's just an inner grain that's like, where do I fit in? How tough am I? I had this conversation with my son. He's 20 years old. And he, not long ago, he said, "Dad, there's only one thing I regret about my hockey career." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I never got in a fight," which shocked me. And then I was thinking, well, it's interesting because he's raised. We got three girls and him. So he's raised with no brothers, right? There's no altercation involved. I was much older, and I mean, he doesn't wrestle with me. So it's like, where do I fit in? Would I fight? How would I do? What's it like to be engaged in like physical conflict? Yeah. Like that's a real interesting, dynamic for him to even just raise that question. I was like, that was different for us. So yeah, there's emotion, there's a physical aspect, but there's an emotional barrier that's like, well, how do you get over that? And as well as I know, as you get older, that barrier becomes less and less. It becomes to the point where, okay, maybe I'm my fuse is a little too short as an old guy.
No, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't agree more. I think that there's a time. I think it's part of I think it's part of that like coming of age, even, right? Like you're figuring stuff out, and I do. I mean, I guess my head's all over the place right now, but and connecting it back to the hockey, which what this is a hockey podcast. I guess I got to remember that. But like I was talking about the competitive spirit and the competitive nature. I think that's like it's been squelched. Like you talked about that piece of the heart. Like there's like I know families that have told me like that they're not like brothers are not allowed to wrestle in the house. They're not allowed to touch each other. Like that's
Mhm.
where like some of these things have gone to. And again, no judgment from me, but like I'm like that sounds so inherently not natural to me, And then
I would
and then
agree.
to have the school system be the way it is, and there's no wrestling around the playground, and heaven forbid somebody touch each other. And if there's ever a fist thrown, oh my God, and like the
Yeah.
tenets of the school are walk away and ignore and tell someone and like everything to do with avoiding conflict. And yet I see anxiety and I see depression at all-time highs, and I see like people not knowing how to how to combat some of these things. And it's like I don't know, there's just an inherent nature of like I think like some of these kids that are wound, like you said, with a little more fight in them than flight, like they're told that they're wrong and they're bad and there's no place for that anywhere,
Hmm.
and I don't think it's healthy. I don't know where I'm going with that, but for if you're out there and if you're listening, you got some fire inside, like I think it's amazing personally. Like for me, and a couple of my boys have it, and I want to nurture it. I want them not be competitive. I want them to absolutely embrace it. And Rick Vive said something amazing on one of my podcasts. He said, "You just want to round the edges a little bit. You got to round the edges a little bit."
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, they can govern it at the proper times. Yeah, but
Right.
yeah, if it's never allowed to, if it's never allowed to be vented, yeah, you could squelch their heart.
Yeah. The And it's happening in hockey too. Like even with the BCHL, I mean, I'm working with some guys there, and like they've been in the league for 2 years. A couple of them, no fights, right? And again, not that you're supposed to, but like, God, like I would have been curious. I would have gotten one for sure by now, just because I'd be too damn curious not to, like to your son's point. Anyways, well, it is what it is. I don't know. I should get back to your career here. We're already an hour and 20 in, but I love that we just kind of go on tangents sometimes, and that's the way it's supposed to go. Going to take another short break from the podcast to announce April 3rd, the Peak Potential Hockey Project. My signature mindset program for hockey players is about to launch again. The guided mission is back. We've taken a couple months off, but it is back, and it's at a perfect time to either align with tryouts, to align with spring hockey, or just to take a breather after your season is over so you can get ready for the summer and to work on this stuff over the off season so you're ready to roll come next season. I want to read a testimonial from a Peak Potential graduate just to get you rolling. This was from a U15 player that took the program with his entire team, the Tabor Golden Suns. And he writes, "This course helped me a lot. It gave me the confidence to know I can make a mistake and that mistake doesn't have to define how the rest of my game goes." Like, let's pause right there. Like, that's a really crucial thing for athletes. And it's much easier said than done. To be able to say that and actually believe it is different than just saying it. A lot of times it's easy to say, oh yeah, mistake, it's not a big deal. But the actual processing that's going on inside, it is a big deal. And it is something that they're trying to avoid. But so he can now say that is not something that has to define him or does not have to define how the rest of his game goes. That's a huge breakthrough. A skill I gained from this course is the positivity of a strong mindset. For example, if you have a bad mindset when you are down 2 going into the third, you won't go out there and dominate. You will do the opposite and not push yourself to win. That was something that their team grew through this year, and they definitely found the differences when they were able to focus on what they could control, focus on what moments in the game they needed to have some fortitude, some resiliency, and to have some pushback. And when you identify those moments in the game as triggers, then you can come out collectively and do a better job. And at least not collectively, you can do it individually as one player. And he definitely noticed a difference with that. Another skill Jason has taught me is how to visualize before a game and get ready. This could include having all your gear on 20 minutes until buck drop, close your eyes and visualize yourself scoring a goal or even a breakout pass. We do cover visualization in the program, different ways to do it, when to do it, why you're doing it, and how to help the particular player to play better, which is what this whole thing is about, is how do you get better performance on the ice. So for some players, not really understanding what visualization is or how they can use it, this can be a big game changer for them when we do touch on it. And he concludes here, I would highly recommend this course for athletes trying to gain an edge on the competition. Isn't that a fantastic line? I would highly recommend this course for athletes trying to gain an edge on the competition. And who out there isn't? If you're playing any type of elite level stuff, which is actually one of the inherent problems with what I do, is because we're kind of a bunch of secret squirrels when things are going well. And there's a lot of us out there that will experience this thing, and it is a competitive advantage. It is a competitive edge, and we don't want to talk about it. So we want to share what we know. We don't want to share the advantage that we have. So thank you very much here for Tate for writing that and saying, if you are trying to get an edge in the competition, this is for you. Thank you, Coach Pods. So fantastic when players, and especially like a 14-year-old player, to take the time to write that. We all know how challenging that can be sometimes. So for him to take the time to put those words down on paper of what the course meant to him, I'm appreciative of that and grateful. And yeah, hopefully that is something that will make you move towards some action here on April 3rd and get your player involved, or ask mom or dad, if you're a player listening to this, to, hey, I want to work on my mindset. I want to have this competitive advantage that others don't have. And again, until you get in the program, you don't know what you don't know. It's the thing I've been using a lot lately, because I'm trying to explain something that people sometimes don't understand what it is. And that's a very hard thing to do. Hopefully you have built trust with me over the course of listening to this podcast of what I do. I've been around doing it now for quite a while, making lots of breakthroughs with lots of players, giving them the competitive edge and giving them the confidence to play consistently at their top level. And with that trust, hopefully you can just dive in and say, you know what? I know this is something that I haven't explored before. This is something that could do wonderful things for me, and I am prepared to take the leap and to see what's going on. I'm going to be a curious hockey player that wants to be the best I can be, hence peak potential. So if you are that player, hop in with us. April 3rd, it'll be fantastic. You can find the link on my website, upmyhockey.com. If you're listening at home, upmyhockey.com/peak. That's PEAK-potential. / if you want to take right to the main page and you can get all the info you want about it. Obviously, you can also reach out to me on social media anywhere and ask your questions, and I'll get back to you. The link is also available direct to that link that I just told you in my IG profile at Jason Podolin. So we'll get you back to the conversation now with Dean McAmmond. You had 2 Stanley Cup runs. 2. We already talked about 3.
Yeah,
to the final.
92. I was at the Blackhawks. We lost against Mario and Yager. I was a 18-year-old.
Oh wow! So you started with a run to the Cup final. That's bonkers. So you went 3 times, and empty-handed, bridesmaid 3 times.
Yeah, I almost ended up 4 times, because in 05, when they, I think it was 06. Edmonton went to the finals, and that year they tried to trade for me out of St. Louis, and they ended up sending Marty Reisner, who was supposed to go to St. Louis for me. They ended up sending him to Boston in the Samsonov deal. And I was supposed to be in Edmonton when that year that they lost against Carolina. The deal fell through. Yeah. And I remember fishing in Slave Lake, in northern Alberta. I'm fishing, listening to the Cup run, Edmonton, Carolina. Because I mean, when the deal fell through, I was like, oh, I was going to go to Edmonton, whatever. But now they go on this tangent. They're in the Cup finals, and I'm fishing in Slave Lake, listening to the game on the radio. I'm like, as much as I want them to win, I'm like, oh man, I could be there right now.
How did you know?
It's just like that would have been. And then so I went Calgary. And then the next year, Edmonton after the lockout. And then the year after that was Ottawa in 07. So I would have been in the Stanley Cup finals 3 years in a row with 3 Canadian teams.
That's crazy.
And lost everyone.
Wasn't that Corey Perry just recently?
Yeah, yeah, he had it.
Not the
Yeah,
3 Canadian teams, though, but I think he was the first guy ever, if I remember the thing right, to do that. 3 different teams, 3 different cup finals and in a
yeah.
row and to lose.
I don't feel bad for him because he beat me in Anaheim in '07. So
Right, he's got one.
I don't
How
care.
did you know that that deal was on the table? Did they told you, obviously?
Well, deadline. I go home. I'm on my way back to the house in St. Louis on the trade deadline, and I'm getting a call from from somebody who had a lead. It was an actual reporter, had a lead on the whole thing. Got tipped off, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, what's going on?" He's like, "Well, nothing." And I was like, "No, I'm just pulling into my driveway home." And it wasn't long after that that Plo, I forget Plo's RGM was Plo, Mr. Plo. I don't know his first name. He called me and he had to tell me what's going on because it was out on the wire that Edmonton was trying to get me. The problem was that they when they let Reasoner go to Boston, they had to pull a guy up out of the minors. He had to clear waivers in order to be dealt to me for me to St. Louis. So I'd go back to Edmonton. So that whole process was there was lots of people in the know. And then it came to me where it's like, yeah, this is what the next day when I went to the rink, this is what they were trying to do, and it fell through. So I was like, oh, great. So I'm still here. Tried to trade me. What, good.
Weird, right?
Yeah, really weird. So that's how that. What's that?
Like how was that? Because I mean, a lot of times for the casual fan who's listening, like to be traded is a bit odd. I mean, somebody doesn't want you, kind of, but yet
Yeah.
somebody does want you. At least that's the way you perceive it. A lot of times, I found out later. I mean, as a young kid, I'm like, oh, Florida didn't want me, right? But I talked to them. Oh, they actually love me, but like they wanted to bring someone in that was going to help them that year, and they had to give up something that they liked. But the human being in us translates that however we want to translate it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
How,
when you
how
have
did
to
you
apply a
translate that?
tool. Apply the right tool to have the right perspective, or else we could sue ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. So how were you in that environment? Like, so now you're on the team. You knew that they wanted to get traded. Like, that is a little bit odd because usually it's only after the fact that you got traded you have to do it all. But now you're sitting in the same locker room with the same guys, and thought you might have been out the door.
Yeah. Well, at that time, I mean, St. Louis was team, I don't know, 5. I don't remember, but I'd already been traded from Chicago to Edmonton, Edmonton back to Chicago, Chicago to Philly, Philly to Calgary, Calgary, Colorado, back to Calgary. So
Those are all trades?
those were all trades. Yeah.
Wow.
I signed as a free agent in St. Louis after all those trades. So, and it was a 1-year deal. So at this point, I was 32 years old. So that deal wasn't, I was like, whatever, I'll find a deal somewhere else later on.
Right.
So yeah, it was the first few that were harder. And not being wanted when I was sent back to to Calgary from Colorado. Colorado just basically called Calgary and was like, we're done with them. You want them back? So Calgary said, sure. Because I mean, before that, I had a career year with Iggy and Connie where we all had career years and we had a great line. So
Right.
Big Button was a fan. He's like, yeah, sure, we'll take him back. So I'm glad I had a few in my corner, or else it could have been a short. It could have been, 496 instead of 996.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's nuts. Yeah, I just opened up your trades, tons of trades, and you were dragging a family around through that most of the time, weren't you?
Yeah. So last trade from Ottawa to the island was in '09, and again at the deadline, I was just like, I was actually loading the kids up to go take them skating at the local rink there, and they were in public skating or skating lessons.
Yeah.
And I was on my way closing the hatch of the vehicle, and my wife comes in the garage holding the phone. She just goes, and I was like, oh no, again, yeah. So yeah, I got traded. I called the family together, and the kids are in the living room, all 4 of them crying, and it was just like, yeah, I was just like, I'm done. 17 years, but I ended up playing one more after that, so it was still good. Pretty grateful. Still had a good career, so it worked out.
Speak to that about the family side, though, because I mean, usually there's not much time given to that. You are A lot of guys do have families. I mean, I think that's why a lot of these contracts now, when the guys get to the position where they can ask for it, they ask for the no move clause. They want some stability. They want to be able to call home and grow some roots. Uh, has there ever been a conversation since, now that your kids are, into young adulthood and doing their own thing, about like their childhood and I'm sure there's a lot of cool aspects of chasing an NHL dad around and that, but just the consequences of that. How's that conversation been?
Well, sometimes when they were young, the conversation now is a little bit more one-sided, of me talking to them about how, I wish I would have had maybe a different focus at that point. I mean, definitely 100% focused on my career, but to really value, I don't think it'd be different with any other parents, to really value what you had when the kids are small. To cherish those times a little bit more, because they don't last. And so now that they're older, those are some of the stories I relate to them, where I feel kind of regretful that, I was a little bit stressed out with, all of my career, and that probably was to their detriment. And then because they were so young, there's part of it where they don't get to recognize, exactly. They know that I was a hockey player, but really I'm just dad. My son was talking to one of his kindergarten colleagues when he was in a class outing, and the teacher was relaying a story to these two kids walking along, talking. And the one kid asked my son, "Well, what did your dad do?" And he says, "My dad's a hockey player." And then the other kid says, "Oh, my dad's a hockey player." And then my son looks at this kid and says, "Oh, did your dad play for the Senators too?" And it was like his concept of what it is I did with it, he had no real idea. And so it wasn't until, I was retired a few years that, I got to take them back to a few games here and there and go back behind the scenes. And my two middle kids were with me. One was born in Chicago, so we went to watch, and one was born in Calgary, so we went to watch Calgary and Chicago in Calgary. So one wore a Hawks jersey, one wore a Flames jersey, and now we're behind the scenes talking to people. And at that time it was Taves and Kane and and then the coaches were my coaches in St. Louis, and trainers were from Ottawa. It's just like there's a gamut of people that I'm crossing, and my kids are looking at me like, "Dad, how do you know all these people?" And their concept was just me as dad. But for 18 years I was in this environment, and this was my normal. So it was great for me to be able to take them back there and for them to see it, and then kind of give them a different perspective of who their dad was.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing. I mean, just listening to your story through my ears, and like, I got married and had kids after I was done. Like, my wife has never seen me play, really. Technically, she saw me play an alumni game, but so I did the whole thing single, right? So like, for me being ultra focused on the career, it was, there was nothing else really to distract from that. So like, I think in some aspects it was good for me, like that I could be all in kind of and not have anything else at home. And there's also part of me seeing the guys that had families. Well, there was a reason then to get home and to connect and like to have something else that you weren't focused on, right? So I think that there's probably a nice balance there that some of the family guys got to experience that I didn't. But to bring a full circle, like my boys now 13, 12, and 10, like big hockey players, as you know, like they love the game. Like it would be super cool to be playing in the NHL right now for them. Right.
Yeah.
Because like to have the dad that's doing that and be able to go behind the scenes. And, I think that would be super cool for those guys that are playing and have players. I know the kids would appreciate that aspect of it for sure.
Yeah, that would be pretty thrilling for them to take that in right now.
What your son, how old was he when you retired? Was he a hockey? Did he know he wanted to play hockey at that point?
No, he was just kind of getting his feet wet with the hockey, because I think when we went to New Jersey, it was 2010, and he's an 02, so he was 8 in New Jersey. I think we had him in skating, but we didn't have him in hockey because of the dynamics of when I got there and how long we were going to be there. So it wasn't really until he came back to Vernon in 2011. So now he's like 9 years old, and that's when he was really, starting to get involved with his own hockey and his teams and stuff. So yeah, it was a little bit slower to on the starting line there.
What's the so we talked about the 3 cup runs, and you mean the 996 games. Well, actually, maybe no, let's go with cup runs first. We have to hit the 996 too before we say goodbye though.
Mm-hmm.
But any like, was one in your mind like closer or sweeter or more, is more sour taste in your mouth for any of them? I mean, the first one, you were a young guy. It was the first thing. You had 3 games, so probably not quite as connected to that one. I assume that you would be more connected to the run with either Ottawa or with Edmonton. I mean, sorry, or Calgary. But we speak to that.
First one, I was 18. I mean, that team was the President Trophy winning Blackhawks. Chelios, Goulet, Larmer, Roenick. Our goalies were Eddie Belfour and Dominic Hasek. Like it was a pretty, Brent Sutter and Noonan and, I was just a kid watching this team. So that was a different dynamic. The 04 Cup run in Calgary was huge. The problem is I ended up having back surgery. But earlier in that season, when I first was injured, I played about 2 months centering the top line with Iggy and whoever on the left side, Marty Jelena, Oleg Sprikin. And I had to do that because really I was drafted as a centerman and we were short. And we ended up, I ended up playing myself in the hospital, but I helped give that team a berth in the playoffs, and then they took over from there and they had an amazing run. So I felt a part of that group. I felt like, this was my team and I'm competing and I'm contributing for that cause. And then in Ottawa I was more of the fourth line guy. I mean, we had Alfredson, Spezza, Heatley, Fish, Neal. Like we were deep with talent, Comrie, and Vermette. And I played fourth line minutes, but I played some good fourth line minutes. Like there was one part where Brian Murray looks down the bench at myself, Patrick Eaves, and Christoph Schubert or Oleg Sprikin again. He's like, I don't know why I don't play you guys more. And I'm kind of thinking, I don't know why you don't play us more either. But we were strong enough that we had 4 lines that could just roll, and that's a big part of why we made the run in Ottawa was we had depth. And we didn't miss a beat no matter who you put on the ice. So I felt more a part of those cup runs, and definitely in Ottawa. I ended up getting knocked out by Pronger in Game 3, the game I scored a goal. That was the only game we ended up winning. That wasn't because of me. It was like a good effort, but we ended up winning that game. It's too disappointing that we went on to lose. 4 games to 1. So. But then again, in backtracking, going to Calgary, I mean, we should have been cup, Stanley Cup champions. Really, they couldn't determine whether goals in. So it would have been nice to have that.
When did you have the surgery?
My back surgery?
Yeah.
What year? The cup run?
Yeah.
I had it in February.
Jeez, eh?
So I had a disc that was bothering me like in November. I made it to December, and I kept pushing through to that January, and finally in the All-Star break, like I tried to come back after that. I was like, I can't. Like I was in so much pain. The disc was huge. The neurosurgeon was like, man, I don't know what you were doing. Like you're trying to set some sort of record. But I was just like, man, this is my opportunity. I'm playing with Jerome McGinley on the right side. I'm like, it doesn't get any better than this. And I would rock on the bench just to distract myself from the pain. And eventually I couldn't do it. And we ended up making the playoffs, but I had surgery in end of February, March. So my recovery, I couldn't get back in time.
How hard was that?
It was tough. It was tough watching them go on the run, but I'm sharing now. People don't know, and I guess this would be a way that I'm letting know is that I don't know. Like, I don't know if that team would have made the playoffs. I actually don't know if that team would have made the playoffs. Like, I came off the left wing. We had Craig Conroy was hurt, and Steve Reinkirk was hurt. Those were our top 2 centermen. So basically, Stefan Yell and I were playing 1-2, and then we had some I forget who was our third and fourth centerman, but we had a leaky boat, and I helped patch the leak, and we made it to the finals. But nobody remembers that, right?
Right. Well, that's super cool.
There's kind of a good feeling where I know I helped get that team at least to the starting gate of the playoffs. So that's my take from it.
Well, one thing I know for sure that the boys remember. I mean, that's kind of one of the things that which makes hockey so great. And I instantly connect Brent Gilchrist because like that year they won the cup, right? And what he was going through which he was on the podcast a little while ago, which is a little bit, I mean, his story came out a bit more just because the boy, like they really talked about it, he was in the playoffs, like going through what he was going through with his pain shots between periods and ended up playing until his groin actually ripped off his body. But like that was inspirational, you know, to them. And like, and that is still one of the things that all those guys talk about from that cup year is Brent Gilchrist and what he was able to do for the guys. But the casual fan, right, maybe doesn't really remember Brent Gilchrist from a team that has 10 Hall of Famers on it, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, I bet you I talked to Jerome McGinley or I talked to Craig Conroy or whoever I'm going to talk to, they would know exactly what you did for that team and then the time when you did it. And that's sometimes that's good enough for most of us that were in those rooms, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, one of the comments was made by Daryl Sutter at the end of the year. I had a love-hate relationship with Daryl. I loved him. I had ultimate respect for him, but there was days I hated him. And I think that was the thing that worked for me was he pushed the right buttons. But we were sitting after the cup run, we're sitting in his office and he said, well, you know what? Do you know? And I said, what? He said, we were one man short. And that really, you know, made me feel good, but it also made me hurt at the same time because he knew that if I was there, we probably would have had a little bit more push and might have helped tip the scales a little bit. So, you know, that's a pretty special thing to come from a guy of that hockey status. And so there's balance between that and on the trip home from Calgary to Vernon, we were in Revelstoke and Golden. I'm washing my hands in the bathroom and I look down at this guy beside me washing his hands and he's got Calgary Flames flip-flops. This is after the cup run. I look and I said, oh, Flames fan, eh? And he's like, Flames all the way, buddy. And he walks out of the bathroom and I was like, oh, you're a big Flames fan. So there's a balance of, yeah, good and bad, but that's a funny story that I'll never forget. Yeah.
Oh, goodness. That's wild. Yeah, I mean, that was a fun to watch. I mean, I can't even remember what I was doing, but just even seeing the Red Mile and like the energy in that city and nothing like being in a Canadian city for something like that, right?
It was awesome. Everybody was talking about it. It was all encompassing. The whole city was excited and they were behind us. So it was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you, I mean, Jerome lives close. I mean, I've actually talked with him a little while. I mean, our kids are relatively close to the same age, and so we've had a few chats recently. I think I saw Craig Conroy, assistant GM of the Flames, now at one of these playoff games the other day. Do you have guys that you keep in touch with from your 18 years there in the game?
Yeah, once in a while. I reached out to Iggy the other day. He came out to our program actually with the Vipers, so we connected there. Just the local guys like yourself, Ollie, Tyler Wright, once in a while. Some of the local guys that we see, connect with them, and then occasionally I get an NHLPA outing or a golf thing. You run into guys like Wade Redden in Kelowna, and other Todd Simpson, and just guys like that you rub shoulders with, and yeah, they're just the local guys. Other guys like out in Ottawa, Sean Donovan, who he was with me in Calgary. Some guys that I spent a little more time with off the ice that I connect with here and there. But for the most part, our families, like yourself, our families occupy quite a bit of our time. So, right. But I was recently just back in juniors of current in our junior days, that 30-year anniversary team. And it's, how it is, you get back with those guys and it's just like, 30 years feels like, 30 days or three months. It's not, it's there's always that connection. So yeah, it's good when you get to see them, but yeah, you can only take in so many doses. Yeah.
I guess why I was asking is because, somebody like yourself, almost 1,000 games in the 18 years and all the places that you played, like there's a little bit of, bittersweetness to that, because of course you don't want to move all the time and all the rest of that, but you end up meeting so many people, right, and so many connections. And I'm sure that if you wanted a job in the game, you could have one. Was that a conscious decision? That, you're such a family guy, I maybe assume that it was like, okay, you guys dedicated this time to me, now that I'm done, I'm going to be home and this is what I'm going to do, or did that ever cross your mind of getting back involved in it?
You're right. I do know a lot of people in the management positions. Lots. Most of them that I do know are in management. There's none playing anymore. But I think because we moved so many times, and it was like we bounced around so much, like, if it was traded to another city, we came back here in the summer. It was just back and forth and back and forth, and a lot of busyness there, which is probably why one of the reasons I was like, I want to do something else. I want to experience, like, am I good at something else? Can I build a house? Can I do something with my hands? Something where I stand back and be like, there, I built that, or whatever it would be. I just kind of felt drawn to, trying something else. And my, yeah, my wife has said sometimes, you should, and I did coach at the junior B level, but I just sometimes I'm not confident with the fact that, my abilities as a player don't sometimes cross over well as a coach, right? So I don't know if I want to push on that door too much, because maybe that's not my forte, right? And then, oh man, a little bit of traveling, and I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm meant to be a scout either. So, and there's no teams close by that I can just like fold towels. So I don't know what I'd be cut out to do at that level. And maybe once now the kids are older, if I have more time, then maybe I could do a little bit of traveling, or, take on a little bit of a different role with an organization. I would maybe try it, but
Right.
I don't know. Not really a huge passion pulling me back there just for my
Right.
own, aptitude, or my own,
I hear you.
skills at coaching.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's just 'cause you have to be drawn to it. Some guys are definitely drawn to it. Some guys do it just because they have to, of course. I think you're obviously in a spot, and I know you're grateful for the career that you had, and the fact that you don't necessarily have to do it. So that's pretty cool too, and you can be comfy and do what you want. But it is crazy, even for me, right? Like, I didn't have the 900 games, but played 10 years, and with all the organizations that I played with and teammates, like, there's so many guys in influential positions now. I mean, that I know or played with or whatever. And it's pretty compelling. I mean, it's interesting too, right? To see the mix, Danny Briere, one of them right now, GM of Philly. And we've had talks before about with what I do. And, it's not like my phone's rang since he's been there, but I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some discussions coming up if he maintains with the job, about like what that might look like with Philadelphia. So it's kind of interesting how these things come and go, and I'm sure your phones rang a few times with stuff like that. Not to mention my call to you to say, hey, you should coach my U13 boy this winter.
Right.
They're coming at you from all angles.
Right.
Before we go, I want to talk to the 996, because the Silver Stick is super cool. I was there for one Silver Stick ceremony with Gary Galley, and when I was with the LA Kings, and it doesn't happen very often. 1,000 games. Obviously it's just a number too. It is just a number. It's no different than 995 or number 132. But that is sort of this threshold where you get the Silver Stick and you're recognized and blah, blah, blah. You're 996. Was there any compelling reason to jump back in for one little more time, one swing at the cat to get that number, or was that not that important to you?
It was definitely on the radar, to be that close. And I kind of felt like it was actually I was gonna get it. So that was my last year, 2010, I ended up retiring, but that season I was looking for a contract. It's just, at the age I was 37, its contracts weren't coming. And I was, the Islanders were going to say, yeah, I could come to camp, but they weren't ready to offer me a contract. And I had played for them like 2 years before. And I was like, well, I'll just wait and find out, if I can land a contract, then I'll go to camp. And the Islanders called a week later and said, well, we would like you to come to camp. So I took it as a sign of, okay, we'll talk contract when I get there. But what the situation was that they had 2 games on the same evening in 2 different locations, and they needed to fill a veteran rule. You have to have 9 veterans in an exhibition game, and they didn't have 9 veterans because of injuries and whatnot. So they called 5 guys: myself, Chet Ortmeyer, Anders Eriksson, Manny Legacy, and Chris Kalanos. We all show up, like, training camp's underway. 5 of us show up same day, and that's interesting. So then we're playing in these different off sites, and one of the games I got injured, cut my arm, and I got stitched up. They had to cut my jersey. It was a bad cut, like it was pretty deep, and stitched me up, and then Garth Snow came into the rink, came to the room after I got stitched up, and he's like, "Oh, it's pretty tough." I said, "Yeah." He says, "Can you play tomorrow?" And I was like, "Yeah." So we fly to Montreal or Quebec City, and we're playing the Canadiens in Quebec City, and we're there, us 5 guys, a couple Rochester American guys, a couple other veterans, like our backup goalie for the Islanders, and then the rest of the team is the Rochester Americans out of the minors. And I was sitting in the dressing room kind of like knowing at that point, like, that's what these guys have done. They called us up, 5 of us up just to fill a role, and I was bitter. I was like, oh, and the next morning they had these exit meetings. Now they're sending us home.
Oh,
I
man.
was like 17 years, and I played for you once already. I was like, really? I was sitting there from Garth Snow and across the table from Garth Snow and Scotty Gordon. I'm like, guys, I got $9.94. Just sign me. Just sign me to a contract. 5 games, don't matter. If you don't like it, just I'll go home. But I'm like 4 from 1,000. And Garth Snow said he'd call my contract. He'd call my agent. He never called my agent. I flew home that day. I got home and I threw my gear in the shed, and I was like, I'm done. Like I'm just, after that much, I just rented for 5 games or for 3 games. I just forget it.
Yeah.
A month and a half later, Garth Snow, my agent called and said, "Oh, Garth called today." A month and a half later, I was like, "Tell Garth Snow go pound sand." And I was like, I should have said, "Tell Garth I'll be on the next flight." I hadn't skated, I hadn't done anything, and my professional part of me kind of trumped it and was like, "Well, I'm not ready now, so I can't." Where I should have just like showed up out of shape and said, "I'm ready to play. Just put me in." And as soon as I got my 4 games, I should have said, "See you later." The only problem is that they would have had a tough time getting money from 9 different teams to pitch in for a silver stick.
Oh, that's funny. So that was after the Jersey year then? Like, this has all happened after your year in Jersey?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that was it.
Why the 62 games in Jersey that year? Was there an injury that robbed you of 4 that year too?
No. So that was a shortened year because I didn't have a contract. Yeah. And I think Shanahan got traded or something happened, and they were just kind of, limited on like older veterans, and they were looking to fill 4th line veteran role. And so Lou Lamoriello had a pretty good relationship with my agent, and there was a spot for me to go. So I didn't go up. I actually had to go to Albany. Oh, no, it was in Lowell. The minor team was in Lowell. Get in shape there and then make the jump. So it was until December, I think, that I went up to Jersey, and then the family came later.
Old Songus Arena there. I spent a year in Lowell. It's funny that you were in Lowell.
There's some great spots: Albany, Wilkes-Barre, Lowell. Yeah,
they're hockey towns.
Yeah.
The 996 games in the show, and looks like just a little over 100 in the AHL. 1,000-game pro career. Lots of stops along the way. We spent a lot of time talking about off-ice stuff. But anyways, it was a great conversation nonetheless. And I think you deserve the 1,000. I think someone should sign you for a 4-game PTO right now and bring you back at 50. That would be fantastic.
I don't think I'd make 4 games.
You just got to step on the ice once.
I gotta serve 4 penalties. That's it, and then maybe. Other than that, no. I can barely get off the floor after watching TV.
Is there anything? Just out of my own curiosity, is there anything else that comes with that? Like, is the silver stick the thing, or is there any other thing that comes along?
Yeah, just a silver stick. There's no added pension. There's no monetary value to it. But it's pretty special. I think there's only like 300 to 400 guys that have played over 1,000 games. So it puts you in an elite level of games played. So
a fun little club, right?
Yeah. But in the big picture in life, yeah, it doesn't make much difference.
No, I hear you. Well, man, thanks so much for hanging out with me and hanging out with the audience. I always appreciate our conversations, whether they're recorded or over a coffee. So
Yeah,
glad we were
thanks.
able to record one here and share it. I know people have some value from it. And if you need some help with that, Doc, let me know. I'll come out. You've
Okay.
helped me with my boat enough times. I owe you one.
All right. That sounds great. So yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate the time.
Cheers. Well, thank you so much for sticking around to the end of that conversation with Dean McAmmond. I know I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys did too. Always really a treat for me to get to hang out with Dean. Every once in a while, I'll give him a call and invite him for lunch or for a coffee. And I just always enjoy my time hanging out with him. It's one of those guys that I try to keep in my life. We have those people and try and keep part of my circle because I enjoy him and I enjoy his company and I enjoy what he has to say. And I definitely suggest, if there's a lesson to maybe this episode is that one of the things that I am not great at. I shouldn't say I'm not great. I'm very conscious of it and I try to do it well, but I'm not great at it. And that is keeping people close. One of the things I talk about with my players is to grow your inner circle, be very cognizant of who you hang around and who you spend time with and why you spend time with them. Because our time is precious and, we resonate with people differently, right? And those people that resonate with you in a way that makes you feel good, that, you're drawn to, that you find value from, hopefully you are somebody that provides those same feelings to the person you're thinking about. And sometimes we're not good at that, especially as adults that are busy lives and, we're doing our thing and we're raising our families and we're trying to grow our businesses and be good parents. Sometimes I know I forget to reach out and I forget to make the time to talk to the people that matter to you. And I'm starting to do better at that. Like when I'm on the road and I'm driving somewhere, I will think of somebody that I haven't talked to in a while, somebody that I enjoy and let them know that I'm thinking of them, or try and get them on the phone for a quick conversation. And I think those connections matter. And I've proven to myself that they do matter, not only from a mental health scenario, this about like feeling good on an individual level, but it also helps with ideation, creation, connections, meaning like networking as far as business is concerned. And there's just so many good things that happen when you keep good people close. And you're intentional about it. It forges relationships and friendships and things that really make this world tick. So thanks to Dean for being around and for answering my calls from time to time and allow me to keep him a bit close. And I'm glad that we were able to use that relationship to share with you, that you get a piece of Dean McAmmond now, and you can see why I do value our time chatting together. So lots of good stuff there with Dean. I'm so happy he was able to share a little bit about him and how he was raised and what a difference, his religion and his spirituality has meant to him. And I think that's a good thing to talk about because in the world of high performance, religion can be a tool, and I know that minimalizes it because it's a heck of a lot more than a tool to Dean McAmmond and to many that follow their God. But it is something that grounds people. It is something that allows them to aspire for more and gives them courage and resilience in the face of doubt and all these other good things. And it does allow you to be a better athlete. So again, if this was something that kind of spoke to you, if there's someone in there, then go get curious about the religions that are there and that are out there, and maybe one will speak to you. And until next time, play hard and keep your head up.